We've been over this before on the channel, but there are three great powers in the One Piece world whose balance allows peace for the entire world. Those great powers are the 4 Emperors of the Sea, Marine Headquarters, and 7 Warlords of the Sea, and we've already talked about 2 of those powers on this channel already. We've already talked about the Admirals and the 4 Emperors of the Sea, so today we're here to talk about the 7 Warlords of the Sea, and they're definitely an interesting topic. This is because not only have their ranks changed more than any other group that we've talked about so far, as of the end of the Reverie arc, they don't even exist anymore. This is because they were replaced by the Seraphims, the final thing that Vegapunk made for the world government before he became too much for them to handle. With that being said, the 7 Warlords of the Sea were a selection of 7 incredibly powerful and notorious pirates authorized by the world government. They were referred to as the government's lapdogs by other pirates, but their strength is undeniable, especially since a ton of the arcs during the pre-time skip material just focused on taking one of them down. We even got an arc post-time skip in the Dressrosa arc, but Doflamingo was definitely a villain that deserved his own arc, so I'm really glad that we got it. Just like the first video that I made about the Yonko, I'll only be talking about the original members of the 7 Warlords of the Sea here, and I'll be talking about any others that we've seen in a future video. I just think it makes things easier and a little more digestible, as these videos would be really long if I just covered everything in a single sitting. This means that we only have 7 characters to talk about in this video, but they're some of the most interesting characters in the entire series, so this should be a lot of fun. Now, the first member of this group that we need to talk about is Mihawk, as he's actually the first warlord to ever appear, all the way back in the Baratier arc. It's kind of insane that such a powerful character was introduced so early, but Shanks was in the very first chapter, so you can't really look too much into it. Mihawk is a world-famous pirate, and is currently recognized as the strongest swordsman in the world. This title is pretty damn important because it's the one that Zoro has been gunning for since the very beginning of the story, and he's gonna have to defeat an absolute monster in order to get it. In the early story of One Piece, it's really easy to believe that Zoro is already one of the strongest swordsmen in the world because of how easily he dealt with his early opponents, but that's when Mihawk comes in and shows us that he has quite a long way to go. Not only does he basically beat Zoro with just a pocket knife, once he pulls out his actual sword, he breaks 2 of Zoro's and gives him an injury that's left a permanent mark on his body to this day. Mihawk is a really interesting character because despite the fact that he's been a force since the early days of the story, we still don't really know all that much about him in the grand scheme of things. We know that he used to hunt Marines in his early days, and that he used to have duels with Shanks, but we haven't really seen him in any flashbacks. The only flashback that we've seen him in that I'm aware of, please correct me down in the comments if I'm wrong, is the one where it was shown that he was at Roger's execution, alongside a ton of other names that are important at the current day. He also hasn't really shown up all that often at the current day either, as the arc that he's the most prominent in is Marineford, as he was forced to participate in the battle because of the fact that he was one of the 7 Warlords of the Sea. Even in that battle, he doesn't do all that much, as he sends a single attack at Whitebeard that's blocked by Jozu, tests Luffy to see what kind of potential he has, and has a short fight against Vista where it never really seemed like he was trying, in my opinion. And now in the final saga of the story, he's teamed up with Crocodile to torture Buggy and create a bounty hunting organization that hunts Marines called the Cross Guild. Hopefully that means that we'll be seeing him more often, but it's kind of hard to speculate on what Mihawk even wants, as it seems based on his reaction that he doesn't want to go after the One Piece and might just be happy with his title. A lot of the talk surrounding Mihawk is speculation about his true power, goals, and past, but just like a lot of characters, he's definitely somebody that I think we'll be learning about rather soon. With Zoro being confirmed to have Conqueror's Haki during Wano, Mihawk definitely has it, and I'd love to learn more about his early exploits, which made him a rival of Shanks from a pretty young age. There are also theories about Mihawk being a celestial dragon, and even directly related to Emu because of things like his eyes, and with the recent reveal that Shanks was a celestial dragon, those things don't seem like they're too far out of the realm of possibility. Mihawk is a character that always gets people excited whenever he appears, and Oda also makes sure to show us that Zoro still has a long way to go whenever he can, even in things that might not be canon, like One Piece Stampede. I'm a huge fan of Mihawk, as he's always left his mark on the story, even from his very first appearance, and I can't wait to learn more about him in the future. Now, the next warlord that we need to talk about is somebody that always manages to stay relevant despite his defeat at the hands of Luffy during the Alabasta arc, Crocodile. Crocodile is a former warlord of the sea and the former president of the mysterious crime syndicate Baroque Works, formerly operating under the codename Mr. Zero. During his time as a warlord, Crocodile maintained a public facade of an ally to both the people of Alabasta and the Marines, all while running Baroque Works in secret with the express purpose purpose of overthrowing Alabasta via Operation Utopia. That obviously didn't work because he lost to Luffy, but thanks to Luffy, he was able to get out of Impel Down and actually had a pretty massive impact during Marineford. This guy not only has beef with Whitebeard, he also has some strange interactions with Doflamingo, and even saves Luffy and Ace while the arc is still going on, something that I definitely didn't expect from him. After the time skip, we didn't really hear that much from him, but once the Warlords disbanded, he started making moves, teaming up with Mihawk and going after Buggy, who owed him a favor. This is what led to the creation of the Cross Guild, a force that's really just hype at the moment, and if they don't end up doing all that much in the story, I will be disappointed. Crocodile has always been a character that a lot of people in the fandom are fans of, and that just makes a ton of sense. He's really cool, his design is killer with the face scar and hook for hand, and you know that whenever he appears, some really cool stuff is bound to follow. He's also extremely intimidating during the Alabasta saga because of the way that he was able to control Baroque works from the shadows, and the fact that pretty much every member is afraid of him, even the main ones that he had a secret meeting with. Crocodile is also another character that has a lot of speculation surrounding him, especially regarding his past, and some of the stuff that we learn about him during Impel Down. We already talked about how he has a beef against Whitebeard because he's lost to him in the past, but we also learned that he shares a past with Ivankov during Impel Down. Now that wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world, but during this past, Ivankov found out a precious weakness of Crocodile's, and that's what he used to blackmail him so he wouldn't betray the escape party during Impel Down. The amount of speculation that this blackmail has caused the community to do over the years is absolutely insane, and I just knew that I had to talk about it in this video. The theories have been absolutely insane, and it all stems from the devil fruit that Ivankov has, and the stuff that we see him do with it during Impel Down. You see, Ivankov has the Horu Horu no Mi, and this is a devil fruit that grants the user the ability to create a variety of special hormones that can alter the recipient's body in any way the user desires. This is truly insane, and Ivankov does some pretty cool stuff with it, like put someone's immune system into overdrive, or give them an ungodly amount of adrenaline, but those two things aren't even close to the craziest stuff that he does with it. This is because he can also force a sex change on a person, and this is what has led to all the speculation over the years. The biggest thing that people have theorized is that Crocodile is somehow Luffy's mother, who eventually got their sex changed by Ivankov, and is the Crocodile that we know today. This is insane to me because Oda himself has said that Luffy's mom isn't somebody that's relevant to the plot, but the fact that something like this can even be theorized about him makes him pretty damn absurd. His devil fruit is also next level broken, as it can even suck the liquid out of things, including humans, turning them into literal husks in seconds. Crocodile, just like Mihawk, will only continue to grow in importance as the story reaches its conclusion, hopefully, and I truly can't wait to see what Cross Guild ends up doing in the endgame of the story. And with that, we've got to talk about the second Warlord of the Sea that Luffy and crew took down, a man by the name of Gecko Moria. Gecko Moria is the captain of the Thriller Bark Pirates and a former member of the 7 Warlords of the Sea who resides on Thriller Bark, the largest ship in the world. In his youth, Moria served as captain of the Gecko Pirates until a vast majority of its members were killed in a fight against Kaido, and we actually recently learned more about that fight. In the Wano arc itself, we learned that it took place in Wano, but during Yamato's cover story, we also learned that Moria himself is from Wano, making the fact that he had Ryuma's corpse and his sword make a lot more sense. Moria is another one of the Warlords that's really interesting, because the state that we see him in during the Thriller Bark arc is quite literally a shadow of his former self. That was not a pun, seeing as his devil fruit is the Shadow Devil fruit, but the fight against Kaido, where he lost most of his crew, really formed him into the character that we know today. This is because it led to him trying to gain enough power to defeat Kaido, and his outlook of crewmates led him to seeking an undead crew. This means that he thought that Kaido was so powerful that he would need people that couldn't die in order to beat him, but it also led to the horror-themed crew that we saw during the Thriller Bark arc. At an unknown point, Moria accepted Absalom into the Thriller Bark Pirates, and also found a child named Perona, who he chose to take in and raise as his own, leading her to eventually see him as a father figure. Later, at age 38, the crew met Hogback, and once they did, Moria offered him a way to bring his deceased love, Victoria Sindri, back to life. That's how the terrifying Thriller Bark Pirates came to be, but the lore behind them is honestly really interesting, and I think that Oda used the horror theme of the Thriller Bark arc pretty much perfectly. This is because the Thriller Bark Pirates decided to reside in a particularly infamous part of the Grand Line called the Florian Triangle. The Florian Triangle is a stretch of sea that must be sailed through to travel from Water 7 to Fishman Island, island, and it's notorious for the many ships that mysteriously go missing within it. The Thriller Bark pirates definitely helped in the disappearings, but they were happening long before they arrived, as they only started residing there about 12 years ago. As far back as 52 years ago, the Rumbar pirates sailed into the Florian Triangle and were attacked by another pirate crew, and Brook was the only survivor. He only survived because of his devil fruit, and even his soul was lost in the fog for a year, but things didn't get better once he was back in his body. This is because the rudder of his ship was broken, so he drifted aimlessly for the next 44 years, inspiring rumors of a ghost ship manned by a dead crew due to his skeletal appearance. Now, if that PTSD wasn't enough, 7 years ago, Brook came across Thriller Bark while drifting, and instead of getting the help that he needed to fix his broken rudder, he instead got his shadow stolen by Moria and lost his ability to go out in the sun. Brook is a character that really had it rough, and honestly made me think of a brand new video idea about tragedy in the One Piece story, but Moria was definitely a part of that tragedy. In all honesty, the craziest thing about Moria, other than his potential that he abandons after his loss to Kaido, is how crazy broken his fruit is, as it's honestly the thing that allows Thriller Bark to function. His fruit is called the Kage Kage no Mi, and gives the user the ability to manifest and control shadows of living creatures, including their own, as physical and tangible forms. This means that he can do a whole host of broken things, but the ability that he uses the most sees him stealing people's shadows from them and inserting them into corpses. This not only makes the person with the stolen shadow unable to step into the sun, it also allows those corpses to move again, meaning that Moria can just keep growing his army. These corpses also take the techniques of the person whose shadow was shoved into them, but keep the physical attributes of the corpse, shown to us when Ryuma kept beating Brook, even though he was limited to using Brook's swords techniques. He kinda took this to the extreme during the Thriller Bark arc as well, when he took Luffy's shadow and put it inside of the ancient giant oars. This not only gave oars physical abilities that he never had before, it also allowed Moria to pilot oars like a giant mech suit, and that proved to be a huge problem in the final battle against him. It quite literally took everything that the Straw Hats had in order to beat this guy, and Luffy had to have 100 shadows shoved into his rubber body in order to have a chance against him. Moria also appeared in the story recently when he went on a rampage on Hachinosu looking for Absalom, and while his status is currently up in the air, I could totally see him still being alive and playing one last role in the story. And with that, I think it's time for us to talk about the last warlord that there's an arc surrounding, as we need to talk about the former king of Dressrosa and one of the best villains in the entire series, Doflamingo. Donquixote Doflamingo is the captain of the Donquixote Pirates, a former warlord of the sea, as well as the most influential underworld broker under the codename Joker. This is kinda crazy to say given the characters that we've already talked about in this video, but Doflamingo might just have the craziest lore out of all the people that we've talked about so far because he was born as a celestial dragon. This was until he was 8 years old, and his father decided that they wouldn't be world nobles anymore, so they could go live a normal life where they would still be pretty well off. With that being said, Doflamingo was evil from the very beginning, so once they went down to the regular world, he still expected people to bow down to him, and that didn't go well for them. Despite his father renouncing his world noble title, the people who they tried to live among resented them due to their long-standing hatred for the world nobles. This caused them to persecute him and his family, burning down their mansion, driving the family into a makeshift shack on a junk pile, and even forcing the children to eat out of garbage cans out of desperation. Doflamingo was evil before, but that's when a switch inside of him was flipped, as while he, his father, and his brother were being beaten and lynched, he threatened to track down everybody involved and kill them all one day. It was on this day that Doflamingo also revealed that he has the ability to use Conqueror's Haki, and with people like Virgo, Treble, Pika, and Diamante molding him, he became the king and dictator that he was until the end of the Dressrosa arc. By the age of 10, Doflamingo had tracked down his father and killed him for giving up their family's noble status, and the way that he did it was honestly kinda morbid, as he did it right in front of his brother Rosinante, who was begging him not to do it. This also wouldn't be the only time in his life that Doflamingo would kill his own flesh and blood in front of a child, but the second time would come in his adult life and would eventually create the man that played a major part in taking him down. Doflamingo is a character whose importance can't be understated just because he's been in jail for quite a while now, because this man was responsible for a lot of the bad stuff going on in the One Piece world. This guy was supplying weapons to countries that were at war, stealing things meant for really important people, and most importantly, in business with Kaido, the strongest creature in the world. It was because of Doflamingo that Kaido was able to get the smile fruits to make his own crew stronger, but also make his grip on the outskirts of Wano even tighter, forcing the starving people to eat the bad product. That's why the first step of Law's plan was to destroy Dofi's SAD factory on Punk Hazard, and then destroy the Smile factory on Dressrosa so he could destroy his business with Kaido. Once his business with Kaido was gone, it not only would make it easier to defeat Kaido since his forces are no longer getting stronger, Doflamingo is also put into danger because he can't fulfill his end of the deal with Kaido. With that being said, Law's plan didn't go perfectly, because even though he was able to get Dofi to withdraw from the 7 Warlords of the Sea, that was never something that he really needed to worry about. This is because Dofi is one of the few characters that actually has dirt on the Celestial Dragons because of his time living in Marajua, so he was able to get his status back as soon as there was a newspaper printed that said he gave it up. This was an insane twist during the Dressrosa arc, and definitely one of the main reasons as to why it was as long as it was, but I honestly don't mind the length because I was entertained the whole time. Another thing that kept me entertained was Doflamingo's crew, as the Donquixote family has some of the most absurd characters that we've met during the post-time skip material. I've talked about some of them in a few videos that I've already made on this channel, but their life of luxury combined with their criminal underground activities has definitely created some interesting people. This family being the one that trained Law in the ways of combat is also pretty insane, but I'd say that Law treasures his time with Rosinante a lot more than his time with them anyway. The grip that Dofi had over Dressrosa was also insane, as he sent the former king into hiding, put the hero of the country's daughter in a coliseum, and has a past with the princess that I don't really want to get into because it's pretty dark. Doflamingo is always a villain that people bring up when they talk about the best villains in all of One Piece, and there's a good reason for that, as he truly is terrifying and a force to be reckoned with. He also undeniably has some of the best drip in the entire series, and the amount of symbolic storytelling from him and Corazone's coats alone makes a future video focusing on just his character something that I want to do more and more. Doflamingo's fruit is also insane, and he does insane things with it, like attach strings to the clouds in order to fly, and literally perform emergency surgery on himself when Law destroys his internal organs. Bartholomew Kuma is a former warlord of the sea, the former king of the Sorbet Kingdom, and most notably, an officer, as well as founding member of the Revolutionary Army. During the Egghead Island arc, we got the backstory of this guy, and he became one of the most liked characters in the fandom, and for good reason. This is because he's a member of the near-extinct special race known as the Buccaneers, and he literally started his life out as a slave because of it. It was so bad in his early life that his mother died and he wished for death as well, but his father begged for him to endure and would tell him the story of Nika in order to keep his spirits high. He clung on to those stories just like any young child would, and I really believe that Kuma took his father's message of endurance and internalized it, because enduring is what Kuma has done throughout his entire life. He endured his life as a slave for 9 years until he was able to escape that life during the God Valley incident, and even during the incident, he was putting his body on the line so as many people could get out as possible. Even as a small child, he stood up to the Gorosei, as when he encountered Saturn said that Buccaneers were born to be slaves, but Kuma disagreed and said that he would save as many people as he could, just like Nika would. In a crazy turn of fate, Kuma is also the reason that Blackbeard is alive today, as he jumped in front of some cannon fire that was meant for Eris and her young child, ensuring that at least Blackbeard would be able to make it off of the island. Kuma's hard life wasn't over after the God Valley incident, however, because it was after it that he retreated to the Sorbet Kingdom, where he stayed to live with Ginny while Ivankov set out to sea to enjoy his new freedom. It was here where the two of them lived for a long time, and Kuma became a priest, but that wasn't the only thing that he did to give back to his community. On Sundays, he would help the elderly population of a nearby village by literally taking their chronic pain every weekend through the use of his devil fruit, literally doing a version of what Zoro did once a week. Luckily for Kuma and Ginny, the Revolutionary Army eventually came in and overthrew the corrupt government of the Sorbet Kingdom, leading to the both of them joining the army alongside their old friend Ivankov. They did a whole lot of good for a ton of different kingdoms because of this, but it was also because of this that Ginny was captured and forced to be the wife of one of the disgusting celestial dragons. Kuma and Ginny fell in love once they were freed, and the only reason that they weren't married themselves was because Kuma was scared that Ginny would be captured and turned into a slave again because of his buccaneer heritage, so this event turned Kuma into an even more daring and ruthless soldier. That entire time, he had to have been fighting harder for the chance to save Ginny, and that's why when Ginny contacted him a few years later, he rushed to her location. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to get there in time because she was dying from a disease that she contracted while she was at Marriage Marajwa, but he did meet her daughter, Jewelry Bonnie, who unfortunately contracted the same disease. Despite all of the horrible things that the situation implied, Kuma took Bonnie in as if she was his daughter, becoming the best dad that anybody could ask for, and also passing the stories of Nika down to Bonnie. When it was revealed that Bonnie's disease was called Sapphire Scales and was incurable, Kuma still didn't give up hope because enduring was the only thing that he ever did, and that eventually led him to contact with Dr. Vegapunk. Luckily, the smartest man in the world would be able to cure his daughter, but since Kuma could never have anything good in life, Saturn was eavesdropping on the conversations that he had with the scientist and sent Kizaru in to intervene. While Saturn did have interest in having Kuma on the world government's side because of his reputation, he could not abide to Bonnie's treatment without Kuma accepting 3 additional terms: becoming one of the 7 warlords of the sea, turning himself into a cyborg, and finally having his personality and free will completely erased. Kuma also wouldn't be allowed to meet Bonnie under any circumstances post her recovery to prevent a possible betrayal, meaning she would be kept under the watch of the world government until Kuma's mind was completely gone. These are absolutely insane demands, especially because of the fact that Saturn was just listening in on their conversation and didn't even know that it was going down, but Kuma accepts them without hesitation. Despite his past, he was willing to give up his free will once again to save the little girl who is his daughter at this point, and even continued to write her letters as he was slowly turned into a tool by the government. This completely changed everybody's perception of Kuma, as before this reveal, he just seemed like this strange cyborg man that barely had any emotions, but that wasn't the case at all. He's a man that hasn't had the greatest life, and has sacrificed a lot, but he still sees the light because of his beliefs, and because of a little girl that was just thrust into his life one day. Even while he was on the edge of losing his free will, he still saved the Straw Hats from Kizaru on Saboti because of the faith that he had in his leader's son, and the fact that he thought that Luffy and his crew had the potential to save the world. Even in his final moments of having free will, he decided to help others, because as Vegapunk made the final arrangements for Kuma's mind erasure, he requested one final directive to be inserted into his programming: protect the Thousand Sunny until at least one of the Straw Hats returned. He didn't even know these people, he just had faith that they would save the world one day, so he decided to help them as opposed to going to see his daughter with his last moments of free will. Kuma truly wasn't a character that I was expecting to have as much depth as he does, but I'm really happy that we got to learn more about him during Egghead Island, because he's truly one of the best men that the One Piece world has ever known. He also has an insanely busted devil fruit in the Nikyu Nikyu no Mi, which grants the user the ability to repel anything via paws permanently manifested on the user's palms. This might not sound too crazy, but the stuff that Kuma is able to do with it is pretty insane, and that includes the time that he took the pain out of Luffy's body and gave it to Zoro. Kuma may be a broken man because of what the world government did to him, but he got freed by the Revolutionary Army recently, and even reunited with Bonnie at the end of Egghead Island, so hopefully he has nothing but happiness for the rest of the story. Boa Hancock is the current captain of the Kuja Pirates, and was the only female warlord of the sea before the organization's disbandment. She's known as the most beautiful woman in the world, but she was kidnapped by the world nobles alongside her sisters as a child, where she was enslaved and tortured for years. It was while she was enslaved by the celestial dragons that she was force-fed the Mero Mero no Mi, which gives her the ability to turn people into stone, something that went hand in hand with her good looks later in life. She's also the empress of a really important nation called Amazon Lily, and she isn't the first important character that's held that title. That's because Rayleigh's wife Shaki also held that title, and we literally just learned that the God Valley incident was started because of her. It's during the Amazon Lily arc that we learn her incredibly sad backstory, but it's also during this arc that she first meets Luffy. At first, she isn't the biggest fan of the Straw Hat Captain because men have done nothing but bad things to her in her life, but that opinion slowly changes throughout the arc. Luffy just being his kind and brazen self really starts to make Boa change her opinion on him, so much so that she's head over heels in love with him by the end of the arc. That's right, our main character has the most beautiful woman in the world in the palm of his hands, but Luffy being Luffy, he doesn't really care about that and just likes the new friendship that he's made. The reason that she falls for Luffy is because of the fact that he was willing to punch a celestial dragon to save his friend, and she just can't believe that there are still people bold enough to do that in this world. She says still bold enough to do that because she was a member of the slaves that were saved when Fisher Tiger went on his rampage throughout Marajwa 15 years ago. This means the Fisher Tiger was one of the only men that she didn't hate, and even though his rampage terrified her, she's eternally grateful for what he did for her and so many others. It was after Hancock and her sisters were were saved by Fisher Tiger that they were rescued by Gloriosa, Rayleigh, and Shaki and brought back to Amazon Lily. This is why she was so close to Rayleigh when he saved Amazon Lily from Blackbeard, as Shaki herself used to be the Empress of the Kuja, just like Hancock is right now. Speaking of that Empress position, she became Empress when she was just 18 years old, and even though she got a pretty notorious reputation pretty much right away, she opted to join the 7 Warlords of the Sea in order to protect her fellow Kuja. Even though a big running gag regarding her character is how much she's in love with Luffy and how he doesn't reciprocate that love, she's undeniably a really important figure in the One Piece world. Even though when she first became a warlord, her bounty was only 80 million berries, it shot up to 1.659 billion berries once the warlords were abolished, making her one of the most wanted people in the world. Hancock is truly a character that hasn't done that much since the time skip, but due to her connection to Luffy and her genuinely high power level, it's pretty clear that she's also going to play a huge role in the endgame of the One Piece story. I also don't personally believe that she'll be Luffy's love interest at the end of the series, mainly because I don't think that he'll have one, but I really like her character and can't wait to see her again. Jinbe is the helmsman of the Straw Hat Pirates and one of the senior officers of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. He's the 10th member of the crew and the 9th to join, and he's currently the most recent member of the Straw Hat Pirates as he joined during the Wano arc. Even though he was the final member to join the Straw Hats, for now, he was actually the second warlord that we learned about pretty quickly after Zoro fought Mihawk. This is because we learned about him while Luffy and Sanji were on their way to Arlong Park, as one of the bounty hunting brothers told him that Jinbe was the one that released Arlong into the East Blue. Before Jinbe is revealed during the Impel Down arc, he's this figure that you really want to meet, especially after you learn that he resigns from the Warlords because of his refusal to fight Whitebeard. He's just the type of person that you know somebody like Luffy would like, and that's exactly what we got during the Impel Down arc and beyond. At first, it's just Jinbe respecting Ace and wanting his little brother to live, but Jinbe's respect for Luffy alone only grows as the Summit War saga goes on. Not only does he help Luffy escape Impel Down once it's revealed that Ace has already been moved, he also helps Luffy many times during the Marineford War itself. Akainu hates the fact that he does this, but the two most prominent examples of this occur when he helps Luffy confront the Admirals before they execute Ace, and when he directly stops Akainu from killing Luffy by taking a massive attack. Even though he does take most of that attack, it's proven that it's necessary that he did so through the giant scar that Luffy has on his chest after the time skip, showing us that his chest most definitely would have broken open if he took the full force of that attack head on. It's kinda strange to talk about Jinbe here because I plan on making a video about the Straw Hat crew sometime in the future, and it's pretty obvious that he's a prominent member. The best moment that Jinbe has before he joins the Straw Hat crew, in my opinion, is the time where he stands up to Big Mom and says that if he wants to be a member of the future king of the Pirates crew, that he can't be intimidated by a mere Emperor of the Sea. This is a bar, and definitely true in my opinion, but there are only a few people in the One Piece world that would actually believe this, and that was shown to us when Big Mom wasn't able to steal his soul. Believe it or not, Jinbe was yet another character that we didn't know all that much about until after the time skip, and even though he's now a member of the Straw Hat crew, we still have a lot more that we need to learn about him. I also feel like I'd be doing you guys a disservice if I didn't mention his connection with Fisher Tiger, as more of the Warlords of the Sea are connected to him than you would think. Jinbe admired Fisher Tiger so much, in fact, that his dream is to fulfill his former captain's dying wish of coexistence and equality between fishmen and humans. That's why his appearance during the Fishman Island arc was so powerful, as he quite literally offered his blood to ensure that Luffy lived, even though that was seen as taboo among his fellow fishmen. Luffy didn't care about that, however, and that's why he asked Jinbe to join his crew, even though Jinbe initially refused. Despite the fact that he's a pirate and a criminal, he's also a very important figure throughout Fishman Island, and I feel like he's only going to become more important now that he's a member of the Straw Hat crew, and Fishman Island is now a part of their territory. And with that, that's all I really have to talk about when it comes to the original members of the 7 Warlords of the Sea. This entire group is just full of interesting characters, and it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about them again when we talk about the members that weren't a part of the original 7. With that being said, this video is getting pretty long, so I think it's time to wrap up our discussion for today here. Please join me next time for whatever I post next. Please leave a like and maybe subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.